The interrogation chamber aboard the Krillian dreadnought Void Render hummed with the low vibration of quantum containment fields. Admiral Zekthar studied the human prisoner through compound eyes that reflected the sterile blue lighting. The creature sat motionless in the restraint chair, its pale skin marked with old scars and newer bruises from capture. Species designation, human. Individual designation, Marcus Chen, the Admiral read from his tactical display. Former maintenance technician aboard the civilian freighter, steady horizon, no military training, no combat experience. Psychological profile indicates passive personality traits. The other Krillian officers chittered their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. Commander Vex-High leaned closer to the display, her exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights. This is what the humans send against us? A mere laborer? She clicked in their guttural language. Their desperation must run deeper than our intelligence suggested. Admiral Zekthar's attention remained fixed on the human. Marcus Chen appeared unremarkable by every metric their extensive databases had compiled on the species. Average height, average build, brown hair that had grown unkempt during his weeks of imprisonment. His dark eyes seemed unfocused, staring at some point beyond the bulkhead as if he had retreated into his own mind. The Krillian Empire had been systematically dismantling human colonies for 3 solar cycles now. Their superior technology and warrior culture had made quick work of humanity's scattered settlements. The humans fought with crude kinetic weapons and outdated energy shields, their ships barely capable of faster-than-light travel. Most surrendered after minimal resistance. The interrogation drugs have been administered, reported medical specialist Thexla, her thin limbs manipulating a bioscanner. Neural pathways are fully accessible. Whatever information this creature possesses about human defensive capabilities will be extracted. Marcus shifted slightly in his restraints, the first movement he had made in hours. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. You don't understand what you're dealing with. The translator rendered his words in perfect Krillian, though the tone remained flat and emotionless. Admiral Zekthar found this curious. Most humans either begged for mercy or hurled defiant threats when captured. This one seemed almost resigned. Enlighten us, the Admiral clicked, settling his bulk into his command throne. What exactly are we dealing with, human? Marcus raised his head slowly, meeting the alien's gaze for the first time since his capture. There was something in those dark eyes that made Zekthar's chitinous plates shift uncomfortably. My people, Marcus said quietly, you think we're weak because we don't have your weapons, don't have your armor, don't have your ships. He paused, drawing in a shaky breath. But you've never seen us when we have nothing left to lose. Commander Vex-High's mandibles clicked dismissively. Empty words from a frightened prey creature. We have conquered 17 worlds in this sector alone. Your species offers no unique threat. The colonies you've hit so far were civilians, Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. Farmers, traders, families, trying to build new lives on frontier worlds. They weren't prepared for war. His restraints clinked as his hands clenched into fists. But word travels fast in human space. Every attack you've made, every settlement you've destroyed, it all gets recorded, transmitted, remembered. The medical specialist's scanner began chirping rapidly. Admiral, his stress indicators are spiking, but not in patterns consistent with fear or panic. This is something else. Marcus laughed then, a sound devoid of humor that somehow made the temperature in the chamber seem to drop. You want to know about human defensive capabilities? Here's what your databases probably don't tell you. We've been fighting wars for our entire recorded history, not just against aliens or external threats, against ourselves, brother against brother, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. For thousands of years, we perfected the art of killing each other with whatever tools we had available. Admiral Zekthar leaned forward, suddenly more interested. His tactical mind recognized the importance of understanding enemy psychology, even if this particular human seemed of little strategic value. "Continue," he commanded. "The thing about humans," Marcus said, his gaze never wavering from the Admiral's compound eyes, "is that we're really, really good at making the best of bad situations. Take me, for example. 6 weeks ago, I was fixing atmospheric recyclers on a cargo hauler. Never held a weapon in my life. Never thought about strategy or tactics or any of that military stuff." The restraint chair creaked as Marcus leaned forward as much as his bonds would allow. "But you know what I did have? 20 years of experience keeping complex systems running with spare parts, improvised tools, and whatever junk happened to be lying around. 20 years of solving problems that weren't supposed to have solutions." Commander Vex High's translator struggled to render the next words Marcus spoke, as if the concepts didn't translate properly into Krillian. "You see, when humans get backed into a corner, when we lose everything we care about, something changes in us. We stop thinking about what we're supposed to do and start thinking about what we can do. The rules stop mattering. The conventional wisdom gets thrown out the airlock. All that's left is the problem in front of us and the absolute certainty that we're going to solve it, no matter what it costs." The bioscanner was now emitting a steady alarm. Medical specialist Thexla studied the readouts with growing confusion. "His neurological patterns are unlike anything in our xenobiology files. The drug should have rendered him completely compliant, but his cognitive function appears to be enhancing." Marcus continued as if he hadn't heard her. "The colonies you've destroyed, those were just the opening moves. By now, every human government, every corporation, every underground organization will have received the transmission logs from your attacks. They'll know exactly what your ships can do, how your weapons work, how your formations move." Admiral Zekthar felt his confidence beginning to waver, though he couldn't precisely identify why. The human was still restrained, still powerless, still alone on a ship filled with warriors who could tear him apart with their bare claws. Yet something in his tone suggested hidden depths, unexplored possibilities that the Krillian tactical computers had failed to calculate. "More importantly," Marcus went on, "they'll know what you can't do, because that's how humans think. We don't just study your strengths, we study your weaknesses, your limitations, your blind spots, and then we figure out how to exploit them with whatever crude, improvised, supposedly inferior technology we have available." The chamber fell silent, except for the thrumming of the ship's engines and the increasingly frantic beeping of the medical equipment. Marcus settled back in his restraints, but his eyes remained fixed on the Admiral. "You want to know the real joke?" he said softly. "You've been fighting our civilians, our farmers and merchants and families, people who never wanted to hurt anyone, who just wanted to live their lives in peace." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You haven't met our soldiers yet." Admiral Zekthar's tactical mind raced through the implications. The Krillian intelligence network had focused primarily on human civilian settlements, which had indeed offered minimal resistance. Military installations had been avoided in favor of easier targets that would demoralize the species and encourage surrender. "Our intelligence indicates human military forces are scattered and poorly equipped," he clicked, though his voice carried less certainty than before. "Your intelligence," Marcus replied, "is about to become obsolete." The ship's communication array suddenly activated, filling the chamber with the distinctive harmonic patterns of an incoming transmission. Admiral Zekthar's attention snapped to the tactical display as his communications officer's urgent clicks echoed through the speaker system. "Admiral, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Configuration unknown. They're not matching any human ship designs in our database." Marcus smiled then, an expression that somehow managed to be both sad and terrifying. That would be because those ships didn't exist 6 weeks ago. See, that's another thing about humans. When we put our minds to it, when survival is on the line, we can accomplish impossible things in impossibly short amounts of time. The tactical display showed 9 ships materializing in the space around the Krillian fleet. They were angular, asymmetrical things that looked like they had been cobbled together from industrial equipment and scrap metal. No two were exactly alike, yet they moved with a coordination that spoke of careful planning and preparation. Those ships, Marcus continued conversationally, as if he were discussing the weather rather than an impending battle, were built in shipyards that used to make cargo haulers and mining platforms. The weapon systems are repurposed industrial equipment, plasma torches that used to cut through asteroids, tractor beams that used to move freight containers, fusion reactors that used to power entire colonies. Admiral Zekthar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed the tactical situation. 9 crude human vessels against a full Krillian battle group. The outcome should have been certain, yet something about the humans' demeanor suggested otherwise. The crews, Marcus added quietly, are volunteers. People whose families were on the worlds you destroyed. People who have absolutely nothing left to lose and absolutely nothing left to live for except the chance to make you pay for what you've done. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up the tactical display. The human ships scattered in seemingly random directions, their improvised weapon systems firing at targets that made no tactical sense. Admiral Zekthar began to relax as his superior ships began their methodical response. Then the patterns became clear. The humans weren't trying to win a conventional battle. They were targeting specific systems, specific weak points that shouldn't have been known to anyone outside Krillian military engineering. The random-seeming weapons fire was actually precisely coordinated to exploit vulnerabilities in shield harmonics and power distribution networks. How? Admiral Zekthar demanded, turning back to the restrained human. How do they know our defensive specifications? Marcus's smile widened slightly. Because, Admiral, you made one critical error in your assessment of our species. You assumed that being physically weak made us intellectually inferior. You assumed that lacking advanced technology made us incapable of understanding it. The ship shuddered as something impacted their rear shields. The tactical display showed that one of the human vessels had somehow maneuvered behind them, despite being slower and less maneuverable than any Krillian ship. For 6 weeks, Marcus explained, your people have been studying me, running tests, taking measurements, analyzing my physiology and psychology. What you didn't realize is that I was studying you right back. Every guard shift change, every technological interface, every conversation in your native language that you thought I couldn't understand. Admiral Zekthar's compound eyes widened in horror. Impossible. The translator implants only work one way. You cannot comprehend our speech patterns. Can I? Marcus replied in perfect, unaccented Krillian. 20 years of fixing broken equipment teaches you to recognize patterns, Admiral. Your language has mathematical underpinnings based on harmonic frequencies. Once I figured out the basic structure, the rest was just maintenance work. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Commander Vexhi's voice crackled over the communication system from the bridge. Admiral, they're targeting our quantum stabilizers. Our faster-than-light capability is compromised. Marcus nodded as if this development had been expected. The thing about humans, Admiral, is that we're very good at learning from our mistakes, but we're even better at learning from other people's mistakes. Every battle you've fought, every tactical decision you've made, every victory you've celebrated has been transmitted across human space and analyzed by people much smarter than a simple maintenance technician. The tactical display now showed 2 Krillian vessels with critical system failures. The human ships, despite taking severe damage, continued to press their attack with a coordination that defied their apparent technological inferiority. They know exactly how your ships work now, Marcus continued. his voice remaining conversationally calm despite the chaos erupting around them. More importantly, they know how to break them, not with superior firepower, but with precision, with patience, with the kind of creative problem-solving that comes from having to make obsolete equipment work far beyond its intended parameters. Admiral Zekthar realized with growing horror that he was witnessing something unprecedented in Krillian military history. His technologically superior force was being systematically dismantled by what should have been an inferior enemy using tactics that had never been encountered before. "This is impossible," he clicked, his voice barely functioning. "Our shields, our weapons, our tactical systems are generations ahead of anything your species possesses." Marcus's expression grew distant, almost sad. "You're right. Your technology is better. Your ships are faster. Your weapons hit harder. Under normal circumstances, this fight should be over in minutes with total Krillian victory." The ship lurched as another critical system failed. Emergency lighting bathed the interrogation chamber in a hellish red glow. "But these aren't normal circumstances," Marcus continued. "These are desperate circumstances, and desperate humans are capable of things that your tactical computers can't calculate because they operate outside the normal parameters of logic and self-preservation." The communication system crackled with reports of cascade failures throughout the Krillian fleet. Ships that had never known defeat were being methodically crippled by crude human vessels that should have been destroyed in the opening minutes of the engagement. Marcus looked directly into Admiral Zekthar's compound eyes, his expression showing neither triumph nor satisfaction, only a deep, weary sadness. "You asked me about human defensive capabilities, Admiral. Here's what your intelligence files missed. When you attack human civilians, when you destroy human families, when you leave us with nothing to lose, you don't just face our technology or our weapons or our ships." The lights flickered and died as the ship's power grid finally succumbed to the precisely targeted assault. In the darkness, Marcus's voice continued, quiet and implacable. "You face human ingenuity backed by human desperation, and that, Admiral, is the most dangerous force in the galaxy." Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the interrogation chamber as the Krillian dreadnought. Void Render drifted powerless through space. Admiral Zekthar's compound eyes reflected the red warning lights as he stared at the human prisoner who had somehow predicted this catastrophe. Marcus Chen remained calm in his restraints, watching the alien commander process the impossible defeat of a supposedly superior military force. Through the ship's hull, they could hear the distant sounds of secondary explosions and failing systems. "Status report!" Admiral Zekthar barked into his communicator. Commander Vexhi's voice crackled through the speaker, distorted by interference from damaged systems. "Quantum drives offline. Main weapons array destroyed. Life support functioning on backup power only. 7 of our escort vessels have been disabled. The remaining 2 are attempting to withdraw, but the humans have somehow disrupted our jump coordinates." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "How many human vessels remain operational?" A pause filled with static. "All 9, sir. They've taken damage but maintain full tactical capability. They're surrounding us." Marcus observed the exchange with the detached interest of someone watching a complex mechanical system finally break down exactly as predicted. "Your people fight well when they have the advantage," he said quietly. "But you've never had to fight when everything was going wrong." Admiral Zekthar turned his attention back to the human. The creature still looked unremarkable, still appeared to be nothing more than a civilian maintenance worker. Yet somehow this insignificant being had become the catalyst for the first major Krillian defeat in living memory. "Explain," the Admiral demanded. "How did you coordinate this attack? How did you communicate with your forces while imprisoned aboard my ship?" Marcus shifted in his restraints, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I didn't. That's what you still don't understand about humans. We don't need constant communication or centralized command to work together. When we share a common goal, especially when that goal involves survival, we develop an almost instinctive understanding of what needs to be done. The ship shuddered as something docked with their airlock. Through the internal speakers, they could hear the distinctive sound of metal cutting through metal. The human boarding parties were coming aboard. "Those ships out there," Marcus continued, "they're crewed by people who lost everything when you attacked our colonies. Engineers whose families died on Kepler Station. Miners whose children were on the transport ship you destroyed near Proxima. Scientists whose research facilities were reduced to radioactive craters." Medical specialist Thexla, who had been monitoring the conversation from her station, spoke up with obvious confusion in her voice. "Our psychological profiles indicated that grief and loss would make humans less effective combatants, more likely to make emotional mistakes." "Your profiles were based on individuals acting alone," Marcus replied. "But humans aren't solitary creatures. When we suffer loss, when we experience trauma, we have this habit of finding each other, of sharing our pain and our anger and our determination to make things right." The sound of weapons fire echoed through the ship's corridors as the boarding action began in earnest. Admiral Zekthar could hear his crew's distinctive chittering cries of alarm mixed with the sharp crack of human energy weapons. "The people on those ships," Marcus went on, his voice taking on a distant quality as if he were remembering something. "They didn't just volunteer for a suicide mission. They volunteered to become something new, something your databases have no record of because it's never existed before." Commander Vexahai's voice burst through the speaker again, high-pitched with panic. "Admiral, the human boarding parties, they're not following standard assault protocols. They're moving through the ship like they know exactly where they're going. They're targeting specific systems, specific crew positions. It's as if they have complete schematics of our vessel design." Marcus nodded as if this news was entirely expected. 6 weeks, Admiral. That's how long I've been on this ship, watching your people work, learning your routines, understanding your technology. Every conversation I overheard, every system I observed, every procedure I witnessed has been analyzed and categorized by someone whose job was fixing things that weren't supposed to be fixable. Admiral Zekthar felt his worldview crumbling around him. The fundamental assumptions upon which Krillian military doctrine was based, technological superiority, tactical dominance, psychological intimidation, were proving useless against an enemy that operated outside conventional parameters. "But how?" he demanded. "How did you transmit this information to your forces? We monitored all communications, blocked all transmission frequencies, isolated you completely from any outside contact." Marcus's smile widened slightly. "You isolated me from intentional communication. But humans are pattern recognition specialists, Admiral. We evolved on a world where survival depended on reading subtle environmental cues, understanding complex social dynamics, and adapting to constantly changing circumstances." The lights flickered again as more systems failed. In the distance, the sounds of combat were growing closer. "Every day for 6 weeks, Marcus explained. "You fed me at specific times. You conducted interrogations according to a predictable schedule. Your guard shifts changed with mathematical precision. Your ship followed established patrol routes through designated sectors of space." Admiral Zekthar's compound eyes widened as the implications became clear. "You turned your daily routine into a transmission system. Breakfast at 800 hours meant one thing. Delayed by 15 minutes meant another. An extra interrogation session conveyed different information than a skipped session. The course changes your ship made, the duration of each patrol route, the number of crew members present during different activities, all of it formed a complex data stream that any human monitoring your operations could decode." Medical specialist Thexla stared at her bioscanner in amazement. The neural pathways required for such multi-layered pattern analysis would exceed the computational capacity of most organic brains. Most organic brains? Yes, Marcus agreed. But human brains aren't optimized for raw computational power. They're optimized for creative problem-solving under stress. When we're faced with impossible circumstances, when conventional solutions don't exist, our minds start making connections that pure logic would never consider. The door to the interrogation chamber burst open in a shower of sparks. 3 figures in improvised armor stormed into the room, their weapons trained on the Krillian officers. Admiral Zekthar recognized the design. Industrial environmental suits modified for combat use, powered by portable fusion cells, and equipped with cutting tools repurposed as weapons. The lead figure removed her helmet, revealing a human female with graying hair and eyes that burned with controlled fury. She spoke directly to Marcus, ignoring the alien captors entirely. Dr. Sarah Kim, Chief Engineer of Kepler Station, or what used to be Kepler Station before these things turned it into a debris field. Her voice carried the weight of profound loss, tempered by iron determination. We received your transmission schedule, Marcus. Every detail about their ship design, their tactical doctrines, their weaknesses. The information you provided has been distributed to every human military unit, every resistance cell, every survivor group in this sector. Marcus nodded, though his expression remained somber. How many? Kepler Station was home to 12,000 people. Dr. Kim replied quietly. I'm the only survivor. Admiral Zekthar watched this exchange with growing horror. He had assumed that the destruction of human colonies would demoralize the species, encourage surrender through overwhelming demonstration of Krillian power. Instead, it appeared to have created something far more dangerous. Humans with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Dr. Kim, Marcus said carefully, what's the status of the fleet? All Krillian vessels in this system have been disabled or destroyed. We've captured intact examples of their technology, their weapons systems, their computer databases. Engineering teams are already reverse engineering their equipment and adapting it to our needs. One of the other human soldiers, a younger man with facial scars that suggested recent combat experience, stepped forward. The intelligence networks have been compromised across 17 sectors. Every Krillian position, every supply depot, every communication relay has been identified and targeted for simultaneous assault. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, as if the weight of what was happening was almost too much to bear. And the civilians? The non-combatants? Dr. Kim's expression softened slightly. Safe. We're not them, Marcus. We don't target families or destroy homes, but their military assets, their government installations, their capacity to project power into human space, that ends today. Admiral Zekthar found his voice at last, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. This is impossible. You're describing a coordinated military operation across multiple star systems involving hundreds of ships and thousands of personnel. The logistics alone would require months of preparation. Under normal circumstances, yes, Dr. Kim acknowledged. But these aren't normal circumstances. When you destroyed Kepler Station, when you murdered my colleagues and my friends and my family, you created something that your strategic computers couldn't possibly predict. She gestured to the other humans in the room, their faces reflecting the same mixture of grief and determination that marked her own. You created a network of people who had been forced to watch their entire world end, people who understood that if they didn't act, if they didn't fight back with everything they had, then everyone they had ever cared about would have died for nothing. The young soldier continued the explanation. Dr. Kim's quantum communication research was scheduled for publication next month. Instead of writing academic papers, she spent 6 weeks designing instantaneous communication networks using principles your people haven't discovered yet. The engineering teams that used to build colony infrastructure redirected their efforts toward weapon systems and ship designs that could outmaneuver your forces. Marcus opened his eyes. focusing on Admiral Zekthar with an expression that somehow managed to convey both pity and regret. "You see, Admiral, humans have this peculiar trait. When we're faced with extinction, when our backs are against the wall with nowhere to retreat, we don't just fight harder, we fight smarter, we innovate, we adapt, we become something more than what we were before." Dr. Kim moved to Marcus's restraints, producing a tool that quickly dissolved the molecular bonds holding him in place. As he stood and stretched muscles that had been immobilized for weeks, she continued the explanation. "The colonies you destroyed represented decades of human expansion, thousands of families building new lives among the stars. But they also represented our best and brightest minds working on the frontier of human knowledge. Scientists, engineers, researchers, inventors, all of them driven from their homes, all of them unified by a single shared experience." Marcus rubbed his wrists where the restraints had been, his attention still focused on the Krylian officers. "Loss, Admiral. Profound, absolute loss. The kind of loss that strips away everything except the essential question. What are you going to do with whatever time you have left?" The ship shuddered again as more human forces boarded from multiple access points. Through the communication system, they could hear reports of Krylian crew members surrendering as their positions became untenable. "The answer," Dr. Kim said softly, "was to ensure that no other human families would experience what we experienced. That no other children would die screaming in the vacuum of space while their parents watched helplessly. That no other communities would be erased from existence for the crime of existing in the path of Krylian expansion." Admiral Zekthar slumped in his command chair, the full magnitude of the disaster finally sinking in. His people had not simply lost a battle or even a campaign. They had awakened something in humanity that threatened the very foundation of Krylian dominance in this sector of the galaxy. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Marcus and Dr. Kim exchanged glances, and something passed between them that spoke of conversations held in secret, plans made in desperation, and decisions that had been reached despite their terrible cost. "Now," Marcus said, "you get to experience something new. For the first time in your species' history, you get to understand what it feels like to be outmatched, outmaneuvered, and completely at the mercy of someone else's moral choices." Dr. Kim stepped closer to the Admiral, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The difference is, we're not going to make the same mistake you did. We're not going to assume that having superior technology or tactical advantage gives us the right to destroy civilizations." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle over the chamber. "But we are going to make absolutely certain that you never have the opportunity to make that mistake again." 3 months later, Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned human vessel, Kepler's Revenge, watching the final evacuation ships disappear into hyperspace. The Krylian homeworld of Zekthara hung in the viewports like a jewel of blue and green, its cities gleaming in the light of its twin suns. Soon it would be empty of all intelligent life. Dr. Sarah Kim approached from behind, her footsteps echoing in the quiet chamber. She carried a datapad containing the final evacuation reports, though Marcus suspected she had come here for the same reason he had, to witness the end of something that had once seemed impossible. "The last transport convoy jumped to hyperspace 17 minutes ago," she reported quietly. "All civilian populations have been successfully relocated to the designated sanctuary worlds. Total evacuation time, 87 days. Marcus nodded, though his attention remained fixed on the planet below. "Casualties? Minimal. 12 Krylian civilians died during the evacuation, all from medical conditions that our doctors couldn't treat due to physiological incompatibilities. No deaths from violence or deliberate harm. The contrast with Krylian tactics could not have been more stark. When the human counterattack had begun, when the tables had turned and Krillian military forces found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't defeat through conventional means, there had been calls for total retaliation. Some human commanders had argued for the same merciless destruction that had been visited upon human colonies. Marcus had spent weeks in strategy sessions, arguing against such measures with a passion that surprised even himself. The maintenance technician, who had never held a weapon, who had never commanded troops or planned military operations, had somehow become one of the most influential voices in the human war effort. "Admiral Chen," Dr. Kim said, using his newly acquired title with barely concealed amusement, "the quantum communication array is ready for the final transmission. The Krillian government representatives are standing by to receive the terms." The irony of his promotion still felt surreal. Marcus had never wanted military rank or strategic responsibility. He had simply wanted to fix things that were broken, to solve problems that needed solving. Somehow, that basic drive had evolved into something much larger and more complex. "Have the monitoring stations confirmed compliance across all occupied territories?" he asked. Dr. Kim consulted her datapad. "Complete withdrawal from human space accomplished ahead of schedule. All captured human survivors have been returned unharmed. Reparations payments for destroyed colonies are being processed through the Galactic Commerce Authority. The Krillian military has been reduced to defensive capabilities only, and their government has formally requested inclusion in the non-aggression treaty system." Marcus turned from the viewport to face her, noting the exhaustion in her eyes that matched his own. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of impossible accomplishments driven by desperate necessity. The human forces that had seemed so weak and disorganized had proven capable of strategic coordination that amazed even their own commanders. "Dr. Kim, I need to ask you something that's been troubling me since this all began. Are we making the right choice here?" She raised an eyebrow. "You're questioning the evacuation protocol? Marcus, this approach preserves Krillian civilian lives while permanently ending their capacity for military aggression. It's the most humane solution possible under the circumstances." "That's not what I mean." Marcus walked to a wall display showing the tactical situation across the entire sector. Red markers indicated former Krillian military installations that had been systematically dismantled. Blue markers showed human colonies that were being rebuilt or expanded. Green markers indicated the sanctuary worlds where Krillian civilians would begin new lives under human protection. "I mean this," he said, gesturing to the display. 3 months ago, we were the ones being hunted, being destroyed, being evacuated from our homes. Now we're the dominant military force in this entire region of space. The Krillians went from conquerors to refugees in less than 100 days. Dr. Kim studied the display thoughtfully. "And you're worried that we've become what we were fighting against?" "I'm worried that we've demonstrated something that was better left hidden," Marcus replied. "The Krillians attacked us because they thought we were weak, that our technology was primitive, that our species was incapable of effective resistance. They were wrong about our capabilities, but they weren't wrong about our technology, or our weapons, or our ships. Those really were inferior." He pointed to a section of the display showing the locations of human research facilities that had been rapidly established throughout the former Krillian territory. "What changed wasn't our equipment. What changed was our approach to the problem. When we had nothing left to lose, when survival was on the line, we stopped thinking about conventional solutions and started thinking about creative ones. We stopped fighting the war they wanted us to fight and started fighting the war we were capable of winning." Dr. Kim nodded slowly. "And now every species in this sector knows that humans are capable of that kind of adaptation. That when we're pushed to the breaking point, we become something significantly more dangerous than our initial appearance would suggest." "Exactly." Marcus returned his attention to the planet below, where the last Krillian cities were being sealed and preserved for some hypothetical future when their former inhabitants might return. "The question is, What happens when the next species decides to test us? What happens when someone else makes the same mistake the Krillians made, but with better preparation or superior technology or a deeper understanding of human psychology? The communication array activated with a soft chime, indicating that the final transmission was ready to begin. Through the speakers, they could hear the formal tones of the Krillian government representative acknowledging receipt of the terms for the non-aggression treaty. Dr. Kim placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Marcus, do you remember what you said to Admiral Zekthar during that first battle? About human ingenuity, backed by human desperation, being the most dangerous force in the galaxy?" "I remember." "The thing about dangerous forces," she continued, "is that they can be used constructively or destructively, depending on the wisdom of the people who control them. The Krillians chose to use their superior technology for conquest and domination. They created the very desperation that ultimately defeated them." Marcus considered this as the formal surrender ceremony played out over the communication channels. The Krillian representatives spoke in careful, measured tones, acknowledging their government's responsibility for unprovoked aggression and accepting the territorial and military restrictions being placed upon them. "But we're choosing differently," Dr. Kim went on. "We're using our capabilities to preserve life, to prevent future conflicts, to create a system where species can coexist without constant fear of annihilation. The Krillian civilians aren't being punished for their government's actions. Their colonies aren't being destroyed. Their families aren't being separated." The observation deck fell quiet except for the distant hum of the ship's engines and the ongoing diplomatic communications. Marcus found himself thinking about the broader implications of what humanity had accomplished in such a short time. The technological advances alone were staggering. Quantum communication networks that allowed instantaneous coordination across interstellar distances. Ship designs that combined human ingenuity with captured Krillian technology to create vessels more effective than anything either species had built independently. Weapons systems that used industrial equipment in ways that military engineers had never considered. But the social and psychological changes were perhaps even more significant. Human communities that had been scattered and isolated had formed networks of mutual support and cooperation that transcended traditional boundaries. The crisis had forced humanity to develop new forms of organization, new methods of resource allocation, new approaches to problem solving that emphasized adaptability over rigid doctrine. "Dr. Kim," Marcus said finally, "what's going to happen to us now that the immediate threat is over? When people don't need to cooperate for survival, when resources become abundant again, when there's time to worry about individual interests instead of collective necessity?" She smiled, though her expression remained thoughtful. "That's the real test, isn't it? Anyone can work together when existence is on the line. The question is whether we can maintain that cooperation when it's not strictly necessary for survival." The communication array crackled with the final acknowledgments from the Krillian government. The formal surrender was complete, the terms accepted, the new political reality established. Throughout human space, colonies were being rebuilt with advanced technology and improved defenses. New research facilities were pushing the boundaries of scientific knowledge. Trade networks were being established with non-hostile alien species who had observed the conflict and drawn their own conclusions about humanity's potential as allies or enemies. Marcus activated his command interface, preparing to give the orders that would finalize the evacuation and begin the next phase of human expansion into former Krillian territory. But before he could speak, an urgent priority transmission interrupted the routine communications. The face that appeared on the main display belonged to Captain Elena Rodriguez, commander of the deep space reconnaissance vessel Distant Thunder. Her expression was grim, marked by the kind of controlled tension that Marcus had learned to recognize as a warning of serious trouble. "Admiral Chen, Dr. Kim," she said without preamble, We have a situation developing in the Outer Rim territories. Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching from outside the known galaxy. Configuration and technology unknown, but the energy signatures suggest capabilities that exceed anything in our current database. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the implications became clear. Just as humanity had been underestimated by the Krillians, they were now potentially facing an enemy that possessed genuine technological superiority rather than mere tactical advantage. Fleet composition? Dr. Kim asked, her scientific curiosity immediately engaged, despite the obvious danger. Minimum of 300 vessels, possibly more. They're maintaining formation discipline across distances that would require communication systems more advanced than our quantum networks. Estimated arrival in human space, 6 weeks. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders once again. The maintenance technician who had never wanted to be a soldier was going to have to become a general. The problem solver who had learned to think outside conventional parameters was going to face a challenge that might not have any solution. "Captain Rodriguez," he said, opening his eyes and straightening his shoulders. "Initiate emergency protocols. Recall all deep space exploration teams. Begin immediate analysis of the sensor data with emphasis on identifying potential weaknesses or tactical patterns. And send a priority message to every human colony, research facility, and military installation in this sector." He paused, remembering his conversation with Admiral Zekthar about the nature of human desperation and the creativity it could unleash when survival was on the line. "Tell them that we may be about to discover whether the lessons we learned fighting the Krillians apply to enemies who actually are superior to us in every measurable way." Dr. Kim moved to her own command station, her fingers already flying over the interface as she began organizing the scientific response to this new threat. "Marcus, do you think we're ready for this? We've had 3 months to adapt Krillian technology and integrate it with our own systems, but these new contacts appear to be operating on a completely different level." Marcus looked out at the Krillian homeworld one last time, then turned his attention to the tactical displays showing the approaching unknown fleet. The red markers representing the alien vessels seemed to pulse with malevolent intent, even though logic told him that was merely his imagination projecting human emotions onto abstract data. "Dr. Kim, 3 months ago I was fixing atmospheric recyclers on a cargo hauler. I had never fired a weapon, never commanded troops, never planned military operations. The idea that I would be standing on the command deck of a warship discussing interstellar strategy would have seemed like pure fantasy." He activated the ship-wide communications system, preparing to address the crew that would soon be facing the unknown. "But here's what I've learned about humans in the time since the Krillians first attacked our colonies. When we're faced with impossible circumstances, when conventional wisdom says we should surrender or run or hide, we have this remarkable ability to become more than what we were before." The communication channels filled with confirmation signals as human forces throughout the sector acknowledged receipt of the emergency protocols and began implementing the preparations for another desperate defense. "I don't know if we're ready for what's coming," Marcus continued, his voice carrying throughout the ship and to the recording systems that would transmit his words to every human outpost within range. "I don't know if our technology will be adequate, or our tactics will be effective, or our determination will be sufficient to overcome whatever advantages these new enemies possess." He looked around the observation deck, noting the faces of his crew members as they absorbed the implications of the approaching threat. Fear was there, certainly, but also something else. The same stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried humanity through its darkest hours during the Krillian War. "But I do know this," Marcus concluded. "We are not the same species that the Krillians attacked 6 months ago. We are not the scattered, vulnerable, technologically inferior civilization that looked like easy prey to alien conquerors. We have been tested by fire, and we have emerged stronger, smarter, more capable than anyone, including ourselves, ever imagined possible. The stars beyond the viewport seemed to pulse with infinite possibility and infinite danger. Somewhere among them, an unknown enemy was approaching with unknown intentions and unknown capabilities. But humanity would be ready, because humans were always ready when survival was on the line and failure was not an option. Marcus Chen, former maintenance technician turned admiral, smiled grimly as he began issuing the orders that would prepare humanity for its greatest test yet. The galaxy was about to learn, once again, that overlooking humans was a fatal mistake. But this time, they would learn it from a species that had already proven it could adapt, evolve, and overcome any challenge when the stakes were high enough and the alternative was extinction. The war for humanity's future was about to begin, and this time they would be ready from the very first shot.